Welcome back, students. And as you know, this is our second meeting. And in this class, we're going to talk in detail about the three important concepts of mass media. But before we start, I just want to have a quick recap from our previous class. In the previous class, we discussed about the syllabus and the three important information communication revolution. We saw how information is so important to our society. Way back from 5,000, 6,000 years back till now, information is very important, and humans cannot thrive without information. And we have definitely come a long way. And we looked at the timeline from 3500 BC, starting from pictographs till now. We have definitely come a very long way. And we looked at the three milestones. First, information communication revolution was phonetic writing, because up until then it was only through oral communication. But at that point in time, knowledge was able to be stored, and that was very important. And the second, it took almost 1500 years, about mid 14th century, around 1450s. Gutenberg came up with this movable type print set, also the printing press, which actually kind of revolutionized the concept of knowledge, because back until then knowledge was only stored, but at that point in time it was portable, and the power to reproduce and duplicate a number of copies simultaneously gave the advantage for a lot of people to have access to knowledge. And the third important information communication revolution was around 1950s, when with the advent of digital computers, knowledge was not only stored, but it was also transmitted to a wide audience, and it also had the ability to get the information whenever people wanted. So these were the three important information communication revolution. And also we are at a time where technology is having such a deep impact in our lives. We really don't know what the future of technology is going to be. A lot of people are predicting Internet of Things are going to be the next game changer. A lot of people think artificial intelligence is going to be the next game changer. We really don't know what is going to happen. But as of now, it looks that technology has got a very important role in our lives, and it is something that we cannot escape from. So let's get started with today's module. Basically, the agenda for this class today is we're going to discuss three important concepts of mass media. And again, we can talk about the importance of mass media in detail, but for this class, we are restricting just to three concepts. And let's look at what are the three important concepts. But before that, I want to ask yourself this question. What do you think is the purpose of media? Because media is kind of a cliche that's been used so widely. We can say when it comes to media, we think of newspapers and television and radio and the internet, and all the other things comes to our mind. But what exactly is the purpose of media? So let's think this way, what do you actually do with media? Let me give you some example how I use media. Okay, I'm kind of I really need to know what's happening around me. So the time or the minute I wake up, my first thing is I look at my computer, my phone, to see who has texted me, and have I got any updates on my Snapchats or my Instagram, all the other stuff. So I'm trying to keep connected with my people around. Okay, so that's one thing. So I use media to keep in touch with people, to see about what's happening. My first go-to site is news.google.com. It's a kind of a news aggregate where they pull in all the trending news from around the world, and I want to know what's happening around me. So it informs me about what's happening, and also it also keeps me educated about so many aspects of life. For instance, I really want to, I think the last time I wanted was I want to actually fix something to do with my mattress, and I was immediately looking up online to see how to go about fixing that. So sometimes it kind of gives me some basic education about how to approach certain stuff, and I do a lot of my banking stuff. I watch a lot of Netflix. I use it for entertainment. I use it for connecting with my people abroad. I use a lot of Skype. See, I'm just giving you from my perspective how media can be used, because media can be used for education, media can be used for information, media can be used for entertainment, media can be used for just killing time, you listen to some music and all this stuff. So there are multiple ways or multiple purpose for using media, and we think, oh, media is there to kind of give us all this, but actually media is there to kind of exploit us. That's the harsh reality. We'll see why. I want you to kind of look at this infographic and kind of get a feel of how things were way back in the 1980s and around 2012, just around now. In 1983, 90% of US media was owned by 50 companies. For instance, Comcast, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Taiwan, and CBS. Obviously, CBS and Viacom they come together, so technically Viacom is not a separate entity. They have merged with CBS. But as of now, 90% of the media in the States is controlled by six media corporations, which is something that we should really take note of. Because imagine the American population, I think recently is about 326 million, but about 200 odd people or media executives, they are kind of giving us the information. Because um, this is very important, because these people, these six or five corporations, they decide what US people should watch, to listen, should see. So how kind of so very narrow the news stream is. So these five or six media corporations, they practically decide what we do with our lives with regard to media. And that's really unfortunate, because our life approach has become so very limited and narrow. And I was recently watching a TED talk which pretty much sums up exactly what the situation of this country is. Uh, this is a TED talk by Allison Miller, where she talks about how she first gives you an example of the world landmass, and she gives us a focus thing of how skewed the US version of reality is. So this is a content analysis she did about news, how American people perceive news, and she saw how the major thing is towards US, and a little bit about Brazil, a lot about Iraq, and a little bit about North Korea, Russia, China, India. And what she did was, when she analyzed this news in detail, she found out that the coverage of Anna Nicole Smith was so much during one particular time, that it was given so much coverage, rather than getting information about countries like Iraq, and the importance of the International Climate Change Committee, which was around that time. So she was comparing how some important international political developments was hardly covered in some of the mainstream media. Rather, they were focusing on individuals and celebrities, which actually is not going to be helpful in the long run. And that is precisely the role of media right now in the United States. Some of the major important issues are completely sidelined, and people are not aware of what's happening around them. Yes, Anna Nicole Smith may be important for some people, but at the same time, why it is important to understand the climate change coverage, and why it is important to understand what's happening in Iraq, because it invariably it's going to affect you and me in the long run. Let's do a small thing. I just want to kind of get an example of what's happening. Okay, by now I think most of you in this class will know what is the name of Beyonce and Jay-Z twins. Yes, of course, Beyonce expecting twins was being covered forever. I think people are even getting old in terms of knowing when she's going to give birth to this baby. And finally, she has given birth to these twins, and the name of the twins are Rumi and Sir. And I think you might think, oh, it's Rumi and Sir, what's a big deal? But they are so very particular that Beyonce and Jay-Z, they have also kind of made sure they have patented the names, because invariably they're going to market the names for all the baby products in the days to come. On the other side, I'm sure very few of you in this class might know about Helmut Kohl, former Chancellor of Germany. He died, and there's going to be a protest in Hong Kong because the British gave up Hong Kong 20 years back, and it's the 20th anniversary. And in Hong Kong, they're protesting against the Chinese regime because they want democracy there. And again, I think most of us in this class might not have heard of Beyonce and Jay-Z twins names, but rather I think nobody will know about Helmut Kohl, the death of Helmut Kohl, because he's a very important political figure in the Europe, because he was the one man who was crucial in the unification of Germany in the 1990s and the stability of Europe itself. So his life affected the life of millions of people in a continent. And of course, democracy is important, and now some people are kind of stressing the need for democracy in this particular part of the world. So I think that's a kind of a good point to start with. And again, I just saw the news that there was a shooting in a nightclub in Little Rock, Arkansas, and about 25 people have been injured. And the news is just coming in. So again, our news is so very important. Without the web, may not know what exactly happened in a nightclub in Little Rock, Arkansas. So that's a good thing to start with, and this is the first concept that I want you to think of critically. How mass media is profit centered. Desire to make money is the central force for mass media in the United States. Yes, mass media informs us. I just told you I watch media for information, for education, for entertainment. I'm recently watching something on TV, which is I think is a great program. But you think these programs are delivered to us? No, these programs are not delivered to us for entertainment or for information or education. They are actually delivering advertisers to us, and that is the most important aspect for mass media, and that is what is driving everything with regard to mass media. So don't ever think, oh, I'm watching my favorite movie and thanks to ABC, CBS, or NPZ. No, their main aim is to give us the ad to give the audience to the advertisers. That is what they are trying to do. And when you look at mass media, most of the mass media in this country are privately owned, except for NPR and PBS, where NPR is called National Public Radio and PBS is Public Broadcasting Service. These two are completely run by corporate sponsorships, a little bit of funding from CPB, which is the Corporation of Public Broadcasting, and also underwriting in certain situations. So they are not relying on advertisement. And these two mass media, are basically a not-for-profit organization, and their main aim is to kind of give unbiased, important news and information for the people in the United States. And except for these two media organization, almost 99% of mass media in this country are privately owned, and their sole intention is to make money. And we're also going to look at some of the important things is how the concentration of ownership is changing over the last few decades. As we saw in 1983, 90% of the US media is owned by about 80 odd people, but in 2012 only about six giant corporations are running the media in the United States. And this is a kind of termed as a concentration of ownership, where the current trend of large companies buying smaller companies so that fewer companies own more types of media businesses. And this can be categorized into four different forms. One is chains, second is broadcast networks, third is conglomerates, and fourth is vertical integration. So let's look at chains. So chains, when we say typically chains, it means an organization having a number of newspapers. And one such example is Gannett. Gannett is a newspaper chain in America which has more impact in several states across the country, and it also has overseas presence as well. And I think this is not something that started recently, starting from Benjamin Franklin till Randolph Hearst in the 1930s. And right now, there are several newspaper chains. And I think one such, the top is Gannett. And they have newspapers like USA Today and several other newspapers in several states. So this is one example with regard to newspaper chains. The second is broadcast networks, and any collection of radio or television stations are called broadcast networks. When you look at the top television stations in the United States, is NBC, which is the oldest television station, followed by CBS and ABC and Fox. And back in those days, they were regulated by Federal Communication FCC, which is called the Federal Communication Commissions, which is also still being regulated by now. But the important thing that we need to consider is because of the deregulation in the 1980s, because earlier there was a cap on the number of radio stations or a television station a company can own in certain markets. But it during the 80s they deregulated the market, and they said you can own any number of radio stations or television stations. And then there began a spree, because a lot of people who had money, who had access to all the infrastructure, they started acquiring a lot of radio and television stations in markets, in certain markets. And there are some stations where they own several television stations or radio stations in a market itself, thereby how they were able to suppress all the small stations, and all the big corporations were able to kind of acquire all the smaller radio and television stations. And the third one is called conglomerates, where it talks about all companies that own media companies as well as businesses that are unrelated to media business. One such example is Sony, because as you all know, Sony is something that owns a lot of media companies. They have television companies, they have video gaming, they are into a lot of other stuff. But they also own something called a medical diagnostic company called Micronics. And this is what they feel, that any media company which owns something not related to media, it can be called a conglomerate. And one such example is Sony, and there are many examples that we can discuss about media conglomerates. And the last one is called vertical integration. It is something that just we discussed about ownership. As one media is trying to expand the base, they're also trying to kind of acquire other such media related businesses. For instance, Gannett. Gannett is basically a newspaper chain, but then they also have stake in television station and radio station. Another such example is Comcast. See, Comcast is basically a cable company. Okay, they are only kind of they were reaching out to people who are giving cable subscription, but then they also expanded base into the internet. But they also now are producing television programs. They also have stake in production, media production. So how a company is trying to take over all the other markets that's related to the main market, and that is called vertical integration. So now you should be having a fairly clear understanding of the concentration of ownership. We discussed about chains and broadcast networks, and conglomerate and vertical integration. So, and understand, basically, don't ever think media is there trying to inform us and educates and entertains us. But the main thing media is doing is they're actually delivering the audience to the advertisers. That is what they're doing, and in the process, they're making billions and billions of dollars. And this should give you fairly a good example how advertisers and consumers are paying the bills. And right now it's a market which is also constantly on the growth. And as you can see from the statistics, in 2015 it was about $594 billion worth of market, and right now it's expected to reach about $723 billion. So there's a lot of money that's involved in this business, and media is definitely funded by advertisers and consumers like you and me. And that's what it's all about. And very few handful of corporate executives are running the media business in this country. And the second thing I want to talk to you is about how technology changes has affected mass media delivery and distribution. Again, going back to the previous class, we discussed about cave paintings. Okay, we had a caveman come and draw some things, and people can come and see. So that's one way of connecting with other people. But then, our phonetic writing, our printing press, our computers, it kind of changed the notion of knowledge, or it kind of changed the notion of people had access to information. And I think we have come a long way. And as I told you, uh, of the printing press. Back in those days, people had to write, literally copy a book from one another book, and it took about several months. And they were able to duplicate copies easily post printing press. And computers has completely changed we people live in terms of access to information. I think now we are living in a global world where I should call global village, where information is transmitted from one place to another at a very very fast pace. What happens in one part of the globe, if we are able to get the same information almost simultaneously. We are able to see a Olympics that's happening in Russia. We are able to see a important tragic event or tragedy that happens in London or in Middle East. We are able to have access to these kind of information immediately than any time before in the history of human race. Let's do a small thing. Where do you get most of your breaking news? I should say, in my scenario or in my case, I get most of my breaking news from social media like Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I mean, gone are the days when television and radio were the platform to get breaking news. But I think most of the news that happens is on social media. And one such thing is, I think when the Hudson plane was when the plane aircraft landed on the Hudson Bay. I think they also made a movie, Sully. I think I got that information from Twitter at that point in time. So again, see how things are changing so fast. And I think recently just before the class, I was watching, I was surfing, and I knew there's a shooting in a nightclub in Little Rock, and that's how things are changing. So everything is online these days. I don't know what is the case in your situation, but that's my perspective. And and now things are becoming so interactive, okay, because back in those times, we just watched, given some information to watch and to listen. But now people are able to get back and talk back and leave feedback in terms of information, and that's called interactivity, because it allows the senders and receivers to communicate simultaneously. See, I was watching some news this morning, and I saw people from across the world were kind of giving feedback about this. In fact, when I was reading this news on this Little Rock shooting in Arkansas, and someone was saying like, how can 25 people are injured in the shooting and not even one are dead? That itself is a miracle. That was a comment that I read, and I think that actually resonates with me, because imagine 25 people were hurt in a shooting incident and none of them died. I think that itself is a miracle, because given the fact that so many people are dying in shooting incidents, because and this was kind of something that resonated with me. So interactivity is the norm of the day. Gone are the days when the flow of communication was only one way. Now it's two way. People are even able to spot mistakes by journalists. I was reading the other day some news articles, and then there was a commentator. He said specifically that there was a little bit of grammar error here and there and stuff like that. So that's how we are living right now. We are living in a world where everything is interactive, and that is the norm. That is what is attributed to technology, because earlier information was just given one way, and we were just a very a dumb receiver of information. We didn't have any ways to give a feedback. But right now we are living in a very interactive society, where we also are able to kind of give feedback and react to certain situation. And that's the second concept, how technology has affected delivery and consumption. Because back in those days, when anything happened, I told you, people had to run from one place to another. And then when newspapers came, when anything happened, they at the next morning, people were able to read the news. And when radio and television news came, they were able to get some breaking information. But right now we have breaking news and information on social media like Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook. And that's what is important to remember, how technology has affected delivery, consumption, and distribution. And the third important concept is how mass media and reflex affects politics, society, and culture. So, I was reading news that we are spending so much time in front of media. Not only you and me. I mean, I'm talking about age group starting from 5 till 90. Everybody is spending a lot of time in front of media, and that is something that is important for us to consider how it can affect us. A lot of people saying our ability to pay attention, or our attention span has gone down drastically in the last few years because of we are living in a 140 character society where people wants information and very short as much as possible. But how it's going to affect the synthesis of information in the days to come? So those are some of the things that we need to really critically think about. Let's start a small thing. I want you to look at this picture, and what do you think of that? Well, I think you all know Jennifer Lawrence, but I think very few of you might recognize the other two characters. The first one is Jocelyn, and the second one is Jennifer Lawrence, and third one is Jackie. Jocelyn and Jackie are very popular actors in Africa, and they are a little bit, they're a little bit heavy set, because here we are very focused about body image. Everybody's talking about losing weight. Oh, summer's coming, I need to show off my body, all this stuff. But in some culture, being a little bit heavy set is considered to be beautiful and glamorous, even though we call it low. They're a little bit, they are like too heavy. They have got a lot of weight on them, because our body image is also decided by media. Again, the point is, again, we're looking at in United States, we are looking at how important to be slim and be able to be in size zero. But in some culture, being heavy is considered to be beautiful. And again, thanks to media, I think because media kind of dictates our body image. I want you to do a small experiment, okay? Think of images that comes to your mind when you look at these words, okay? Let's do this. I'm going to show you a few words. Please think of image or images that comes to your mind. Japan, Africa, Burma, or Myanmar. Okay, so now let's look at what are the images that came to me when I said Japan. Or first, let's start with Africa. See, when we think of Africa, we always think of safaris and people being in very poor conditions, and especially this is a very iconic photograph captured in South Sudan near a refugee camp. And I have a lot of friends from Africa. They say like, "What the hell are you talking about, man? We are more sophisticated and developed than what you think of." But unfortunately, when someone thinks we are from Africa, we are kind of outdated and very poor. That kind of completely drives them nuts, because they cannot wrap their head around like, why do people think us in certain ways? Because of media. Media sometimes stereotypes certain things. Oh, people from Africa, they are like from outdated. They live with snakes and lions and animals. That's not the scenario. They are almost like any country, any town or city in the United States, where they are also very developed, and in terms of technology, in terms of their lifestyle, they are almost on par with any developed countries. And when I say Japan, I think a lot of people, I at least think of, it's a kind of a mechanical life. A lot of people going in there, Japanese cars. You might have thought of Japanese flag. You might have thought of Japanese noodles and a lot of other stuff. But this is what our media sometimes have kind of makes us have a certain view on certain ethnicity in certain countries. And that's really fortunate as well as unfortunate, because sometimes it helps us understand certain ways and culture, but and sometimes it can also skew our lifestyle and our perception about certain countries and people. And this is Aung San Suu Kyi. She is a political leader from Burma. She was kept captive for so many years by the military junta in Burma, because she was actually fighting for democracy. She was against the Burmese dictators, where they were treating people so bad, and they were exploiting the people. And she was voicing and raising the need for democracy in that country. And eventually, now she's been released, and now she's the head of the state in Burma. She's one of the important political figure in Burma, and she was instrumental in bringing democracy in Burma. And again, we hardly know anything about Burma. That's what I think. Nobody would have no idea when I say Burma. Nothing would have came to your mind, because up until recently, Burma was a very closed country. Media cannot go and take any pictures. There are very few media content that has come from that state out to the outside world. But now I think things have changed. People have started going, and there are a little bit of awareness about this country, thanks to political leaders like Aung San Suu Kyi. She was also awarded Nobel Peace Prize for her initiatives and for her struggle against the military dictators in Burma. And I think that's very important to understand. Now a lot of people are giving up their life for a cause. And again, so these are the examples I want to give you. Oh, sometimes media stereotypes us, and sometimes our outlook of life is something, completely by media. And if the media corporation is run by only six people, how small our outlook of life will be. And that is what is important to understand, that we need to also, have a very cautious approach to media. So you can see, I think this is just a kind of small example how media affects a pattern of life, a way of life, of thinking. So media has a very very important role in our life, and that's what we need to remember. We discussed the three key concepts. First is media is profit centered. So don't think they're trying to inform us or educate us or entertain us. Yes, they do, but at the main time, their main aim is to deliver the audience to the advertisers. That's very important. And second thing is need to remember is how technological changes has affected production, delivery, and distribution. Because in earlier days, I know how we used to consume media, and now we are consuming media. Everything is changing these days. The access to newspapers, how newspapers is delivering content, not only through a physical newspapers, but also through electronic, through websites and stuff like that. And how people are trying to kind of renegotiate the terms in which how things are being done. Yes, television is a staple for many people. A lot of programs are being delivered on television, but they also realize this television content is also delivered for online content as well. How Amazon, how Hulu, how Netflix is actually making use of all this programming content is something that you need to keep in mind. And third is how media mirrors society, how media affects politics, society, and culture. So this is how you need to really keep three things in mind. And over the course of the next few weeks, we will look at in detail how all these three concepts matters to each and every mass media. And I've posted the class test for the day on D2L. Please complete it by the end of the day.